Welcome tonight's action hour. Hi, Lynette. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Okay. Anyway, back to tonight's action hour. Uh, it, for those that attended Arthur's class at National Conference in Des Moines, I got a lot out of it for about half the class that I was actually in it, but it intrigued and interested me so much that I thought it was an important opportunity to bring that class to an action hour so others could understand and know what Arthur is going to present to us tonight. So I am going to turn it over to Arthur, and the night is yours.
Thanks, Gordon. Again, I want to appreciate everybody for joining. Thank you guys for the opportunity. It was absolutely an honor to present on the topic that I'm going to share with you tonight at National Conference. Being the fact that it was my first conference and having to have an education session was pretty special. So thanks, Adam, for checking out my email and being curious as far as what it is I do. So what I'm going to share with you guys tonight is some information I think that's pertinent to our population. It's We deal with individuals, of course, that have mobility challenges, and outside of that, there's maybe some other underlying issues that they may have. But what I've come to find after doing this, I've been doing this business, working as an employment service provider since 2018. And what it is that we are contractors to the state of Texas to help with the vocational rehab department, which is the department that funds a lot of career exploration, job placement opportunities, work skill building, and all of these other special services for individuals that have disabilities. It's a federally funded program that actually runs on a yearly basis with a yearly budget that's available to all individuals, of course, in Texas and other states as well. But it's often a well kept secret, being the fact that Texas doesn't advertise, and I don't think either state advertises the services. So I'm happy to share with you guys tonight about the transitioning power of VR. And its impact in the workforce. And hopefully tonight information will be educational enough to share with someone that you may know that may need the services to help kind of guide them in their continual path for independence. So, again, thank you guys for being here. I'm going to share my screen. All right, here we go. So, the power of inclusion typically is including individuals that may not have a particular skill set, may not have a particular activity level or interest level. And what inclusion does, inclusion brings the conversation together where individuals that may not be part of the normal conversation, it makes room for them to be part of that conversation. So at the first slide here, as you can see, there's a couple of pictures of individuals that are on the screen. And at first glance, we can typically see there are some visual elements to these individuals that may raise questions for the average individual, to the point where someone would say, well, there may be something there or there's something different. Most individuals that do have disabilities, or whether it be intellectual or developmental, do show characteristics, or they're not. These photos, there's a couple of different questions that we typically like to add. From looking at the individual's photos, that can you see their limitations? And I'm just kind of giving this as a thought, um, looking to see if you can actually see their limitations. The second question we like to pose is, can you see this particular person's potential? Whether the amount of or the lack thereof, is there any way potentially possible that you see this person's limitation or even see this person's potential or lack thereof? And for most of us that have been around, the answer to this question would be no, of course. But the fact still remains that in a real world, when it comes to the real world of employment, which you and I are involved in, um, these individuals are all of they're kind of gauged to a different degree, I should say, for lack of better words. So if I can get these slides to work, I'm kind of talking through the talking points here. I don't know if it's probably my computer that's slowing down or whatnot. I don't know. Let me see if we can go through the next slide. This is terrible. Okay, what am I doing wrong? Okay. After we look.
What if you use like your keyboard arrows, like go right? Does that work?
At limitations, and we look at individuals. The
Go
question
right. Does that work?
is my screen still showing, or it says my internet connection is unavailable. Can everyone still see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So the next question we pose, just from the outside in, is what would your life be like if the world only saw your limitations and never saw your potential? And it's an internal question that we all like to just pose to mostly everyone that we're kind of introducing this program to, because we want to first have an individual that's getting the information to internalize, as each of us has had a first job and each of us have had opportunity to grow in our careers. But for most individuals that have disabilities, because of the intellectual and the developmental piece that they may not possess or the level thereof, it does, however, present limitations in what they're able to bring to the table. And knowing that this is usually a condition that they don't just live with just for their high school year or their after high school or college years. This is typically something that can be with them as far as a limitation that's often seen and not really spoken of for the duration of their life. So we like to pose the question, what would your world actually be like if someone looked at you as an individual, never knew your name, never knew your skill set, never knew your condition or your your ability or disability, but however, just knowing that something was there that was not completely defined, for lack of better words, put limits on you to the point to where maybe they knew you had a disability, and from that point, maybe they've been told all their life, that you can't do this, you can't do that because you have a disability, or maybe it's a level of education, that they lack. Maybe it's a level of skill, but most individuals that have intellectual and developmental disabilities live within a world that their limitations, that they're often seen only for their limitations and not so much as far as their potential. So what we like to do is, typically here in Texas, there's actually some stats in the average disability population. There's actually about 6,004,166 adults that actually have a qualified disability. What a qualified disability is simply something that's been noted, been documented, a doctor has diagnosed, is actually on record, is what we call a qualified disability. Now, there's often more individuals that are not spoken into this particular statistic, being the fact that they haven't actually qualified their disability. We all know individuals that we've had, in our life or been around, and we knew something was a little off or something was a little weird to us, but it never was spoken of. It never was, diagnosed, or it never was given a title or a classification. But in this particular case, those that have spoken, 29% of those individuals in the state of Texas. Now, of course, each state has their own demographics and statistics, but as far as Texas, as of September of 2025, I'm sorry, as of September, I think was when I pulled these before conference. I want to say maybe it's July, June, maybe it was July of 2025. I think it's when I pulled these statistics. As of that time, 29% individuals, or 6,004,166 adults in Texas, has a qualified disability. 8.5% of those is part of that unemployment rate for a disabled individual. So the average national rate, I think, is 3.5% on an average basis for individuals that don't have a disability. For those that do have a disability, that rate is almost triple as far as the unemployment. In that overall category of that 6,004,000 and so individuals, 13% of those individuals, their disability is specific to mobility needs, which is what initially drew me to Ambucks as being the fact that, typically I deal with people that are paraplegic and quadriplegic, as our population of customers, we deal with those individuals as well. So Ambucks just kind of made sense, when I was introduced to this, to the Ambucks world a couple of years ago. But 13% of that, of that particular population, or specific to mobility issues. So in a nutshell, 1 in 4 individuals in adults that are 18 or older in Texas actually has what's called a qualified disability. And those are staggering numbers when you look outside the box, simply because 1 in 4 people in a group, one in a group of 4 people, typically someone has some type of disability. There are some other statistics, but I didn't want to get into those tonight. But the numbers are really staggering when you look at the disadvantages that these individuals have. So it poses a challenge, and the challenge is typically barriers. And the barriers that are faced by people with disabilities sometimes can be mounting. Emily is the person that's posted on your screen. Of course, she's an amputee. And again, at face value, you can see how an employer just may potentially, discriminate, not really say they're discriminating, but could very well discriminate against her just from a visual aspect, not really knowing much about her. But very well can see that, something's wrong, and immediately put limitations on her on what she can and can't do, or what she's even possible to do. So the biggest challenge for most individuals that, have a disability, regardless of what the disability is, are the barriers that they usually face. The barriers usually come in 2 major categories. The first category is being limited options. Um, underemployment, underemployment being the number one of those things, of those options. Unemployment is the highest, as you can see, 8.5%, out of 6 million people, which is a pretty staggering amount. But many individuals with disabilities felt that they were underemployed, working in jobs that they didn't fully utilize their skills and potential, only because of these limitations that are often put on them without even, being spoken of. It's just suggested that because they have a disability that they can't. And no one says otherwise. And a lot of times these individuals don't usually speak up for themselves unless they usually have advocates like myself, as far as employment service providers that are able to go into these companies and have these conversations and to speak on their behalf. And then usually that's where the limitations are kind of lifted, the barriers are removed, and accommodations are made in order to make these individuals' life much more, much more like my life and your life, so that they're not siloed and they're not set apart. They're actually given the same opportunities that you and I, that does not have a disability, they're given the same opportunities. The second thing being accessibility barriers, physical, as we mentioned, physical and technical barriers in the workplace limit their employment opportunities. That could be some of the places, where we don't have an opportunity to put in a handicap accessible restroom, or we don't have the ability to make our doors wide enough in order to have someone in here with a wheelchair or with walker. So, the limited options goes further than sometimes they're just their individual, inabilities. It goes into their physical barriers. The third thing being lack of workplace accommodations, as we just kind of led to in that part of the conversation. Employees found that many employers are hesitant to provide necessary accommodations, such as assistive technology or flexible work arrangements. The flexible work arrangements, a lot of times, as much as many employers that are short-staffed, it really just kind of blows my mind when I'm talking with employers, as far as they have all these full-time positions that are mainly entry-level or mid-level positions, where individuals can be taught and are capable of doing the jobs, but instead of putting 2 part-time people, they won't even consider that. They kind of want somebody full-time, but they're not finding the candidates that they need. And we actually have individuals that are capable, that can be trained, but they won't really accept 2 part-time positions, as if 2 4-hour shifts. I don't know really what their reasoning is. An 8-hour shift and 2 4-hour shifts is, to me, it's still 8 hours. But to me, I think they get the benefit of having 2 people in a position versus having 1. The other thing being societal misconception and biases. As society put labels on all of us, I think we've all had some type of label that's not really a disability label, but I'm sure there's been stereotypes and stigmas, which is the other part of the conversation, or the other side of the coin. Negative stereotypes and misconceptions about their disability also have hindered their prospects. And as we know, discrimination, as we mentioned, Emily, having being an amputee, that's a visual implication that something is wrong. And someone may not say I'm discriminating, but they just say, well, we decided not to go with, this particular candidate, or we went in another direction. I mean, they're not legally allowed to, they're not legally required to tell me that, oh, it's because we didn't think that she could do the job. It's just a visual thing that they saw. And of course they made other decisions. And we know oftentimes, it's a discrimination. The person came in with a walker, the person came in a wheelchair, or the person came in and there may be, visible, limited use of their arms, their feet, their legs. And, discrimination does play a part in these individuals, not getting opportunities. And then overall employer perceptions. Employers, they have their own concerns about possible productivity, as we mentioned. What is it going to cost to accommodate this person? If we do hire this person, what is it going to cost? Liability is also a concern. A lot of them really don't want to have the conversation about liability. And the truth be told, that through discovery of entering these individuals into most workplaces and establishing opportunities for them, most accommodations are usually about $500 or less, if at any cost at all, because there's so many different opportunities for employers to get grants and stuff like that that'll pay for some of these things, that actually allow them to open up their market or open up the offering to individuals that have disabilities of sort. So the solution became through the vocational rehabilitation services, short for VR. Sometimes people will call it Voc Rehab, would be another short terminology for the service. But typically VR. What is VR? So VR is actually it's vocational rehab, as mentioned, often also called Voc Rehab under the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. The states and territories receive federal grants to operate a comprehensive VR program. And this program was specifically designed to access, plan, develop, and provide services, VR services, to eligible individuals specifically with disabilities consistent with their strengths, resources, priority, concerns, abilities, capabilities, interests, and informed choice. By providing services in a way that the VR program enable individuals with disabilities to prepare for and engage in gainful employment. So it became an amended act in 1973 that was put together. So the VR typically focused on, first and foremost, being human-centered approach. Again, not looking at visual barriers, not looking at visual implications or the ability or the lack thereof, skill level, educational level. It was mainly focused on the human itself, the human-centered approach, meeting people where they are, not where society expects them to be. It also put a very high emphasis on placing people first into the market, training them inside that same market or to that particular skill level job, and supporting them throughout the process of their growth and development in that job as their model. And the last thing is just continual supported employment through the process. After these individuals were placed and trained and supported, they had continual support from counselors, employment specialists like myself, and then other employees and co-creators of their success. So we build what's called natural supports. VR provides natural supports inside the employment where these individuals are trained and educated on individuals with disabilities so that they're able to better support them individuals when counselors and employment services like myself are not needed or no longer needed when we started to fade in the process. So this is the big question. People are like, well, that sounds like a lot. It sounds good, but how do I qualify? How do I know if I qualify for this particular program? So to qualify for VR services, an individual must have a physical or mental impairment that presents a substantial barrier to employment and be able to benefit from VR services to achieve employment, or someone who needs VR services to prepare for, to keep, or to regain a job. People who receive supplemental security income, or SSI or SSDI, benefits are considered eligible for VR. So if for any individual that's receiving SSI or SSDI, it's pretty much a check mark for the box that need to be checked in order for them to receive vocational rehab services. Unless they are too disabled to benefit from the services, most of this starts in individuals as early as the age of 16. So we're dealing with a lot of young individuals that, are youth and young adults that are getting trikes in the world that we live in. I mean, most of these individuals will at one point be 16. So this is valuable information. I feel like we as leaders in that space of helping individuals with mobility. This is just a tool to add to our bag as far as individuals that are in that 16 and older age, just to even inquire to see if their kids are interested in work, or if the family is interested in that person working, and to let them know that there are some opportunities, and the Voc Rehab will be one of those particular services. So that was in 1973. So the question is, what usually happens between 1973 and what has happened up until today? So VR continues to be what's called the bridge. Like, they're considered a bridge program. And what they do, they continue to provide inclusion for people with disabilities. Their practice of making all people feel valued and belonged has also had a transformative effect on individuals, organizations, and society as a whole. And later here in a few minutes, we'll talk more about what some of those statistics look like as far as how this inclusion has helped in the power and the transformation of Voc Rehab services in the employment space. VR continues to align with organizations connecting people with potential and employment opportunities, not connecting people with dedicated skills or a certain level of degree, a certain level of resume. It's connecting people that have potential with potential employment opportunities. So the services are usually broken down in three categories. The first, services that VR offers at no cost to every individual that is federally funded, is education and training. Because we do realize that after the age of 17, most individuals that leave a special ed department loses all supports and all forms of uh, friendship. They lose friendship, they lose network, they lose guidance, they lose a lot of different things after they turn the age of 17 or 18 and graduate from an accredited high school. Most individuals receive a high school diploma, but after then, that's where everything ends off. There's no additional support like most of us had at 17 or 18 that prepares us for the workforce. So VR picks up that piece at the age of 16 and allows them to have, at no cost, education and training services. They also, again, their main goal through education and training is to provide employment services. After employment services provided, the goal would be to employ resources that will keep the individual engaged in the workforce, and also allow them to continue to be supported in the process. Not only them, but the employers to also be supported through many, many different resources that would hopefully have these individuals to have a long-lasting work life. Through education and training, they offer 5 key models. One of those will be work-based learning. We provide internships. The VR services provide internships to employers. Hypothetically, an employer has a need for another employee and could use the benefit of another employee, but however, don't have the resources or the finances to employ that person. Voc Rehab gets with this company and allows them to talk more about their program and what they're able to offer to an employee. We match individuals that have training and a skill in education that's been through the program that meets certain criteria. If this individual becomes a good match, we ask the employer, how about if we provide an internship for you in this particular opportunity at no cost to you? Not only will we cover the wages, but we'll also cover workman's comp insurance to ensure that if anything happens on the work site during this time that this individual is working for your company, that it won't fall back on you. But it also gives an opportunity for this individual to gain valuable work skills in a real world environment that's integrated, and not in an environment where it's only individuals with disabilities. They're working around people with different skill levels, different degree levels, different education levels, and also in an environment where advancement is possible for those that meet the criteria. So work-based learning is a big part of what they do. Pre-employment workplace readiness, prior to getting work, working with resumes, learning how to do resumes, learning how to do interviews, learning how to do resumes, all this pre-employment thing that may be required, getting them ready for work, doing vocational adjustment training classes, teaching them how to prepare for your first day to work. What does your first 90 days look like? What does the you in work look like? What are your interest levels? So there's a lot of pre-employment workplace readiness that goes into the education and training. Certification and license. If they need certifications, a lot of individuals don't even have driver's license. We help them get driver's license. Um, if they need a food safety certification in order to serve food, they're able to get food safety. You know, we've had a lot of individuals. Voc Rehab helps a lot of individuals that go into entry-level medical positions like CNA jobs, caregiver jobs where they need, some type of first aid card or some type of CNA certifications. If they're able to do the criteria as far as the education and go through the courses, Voc Rehab will provide license prep and even pay for the license and certifications for these individuals to become gainfully employed. Education and tuition fees, supplies, laptops, assistive technology devices, screen readers, magnifiers, speech to text devices. All of these are supplies that could be provided for an individual to help them also become gainfully employed. And then overall career exploration, really getting a full picture of what the person looks like in wanting to do in a career and all that may be required. After employment is usually secured or pretty close to obtained, um, they look at career counseling and guidance. Are we in the right space? Are we doing the right thing? Is this something that we can do for the long term? If it's still questionable, we go through VR provides job search assistance. They provide job development, job matching skills. Again, it's spoken, resume, application, interview training, workplace accommodation supports. If they're already on a job and they're having, trouble reading a screen or doing cashier work, we can definitely Voc Rehab is definitely a source to get involved with an employer and maybe provide the cost of that particular screen reader that may help a person that's visually blind or visually impaired, that may help them better read them smaller numbers to be able to better do their job, without having to struggle as much. And then on the job coaching, an employer may feel like, now that they're employed, they quite don't understand all the things about people with disabilities and they're not trying to really educate themselves or go through another training to provide that. The Voc Rehab provides on the job training coaching. They provide what's called certified job skill trainers that go to the job, find out what's needed, and become a liaison for the job and for the person on site for up to 90 days of service, 20 hours a week. This is provided at no cost to the employer and no cost to the customer, all while the customers, continue to stay gainfully employed, but also trying to stabilize the employment with the employer uh, in hopes that this in person can meet the goals of this employer and again continue to be successful. Work experiences, that's the trial work, like we mentioned, the internships. Maybe it's not an internship. Maybe we just want to open up our workplace to allow your people to come in and we have a space where we can always use someone in the retail department to help stock clothes or stock canned goods or maybe we need somebody to do some box bailing, and it's not really a job that everybody does the job. It's not really a job that people that we employ for because everybody does it in our retail store. But we don't mind allowing Voc Rehab to bring some customers, what we call customers, bring individuals into the store to teach them skills about stocking, teach them skills about learning how to run a box baler, teaching them how to do retail cashier work, which is all entry level positions that anyone at any ability level can learn. And they allow us to come on their sites and with their companies and provide this service on the job in real time, as at no cost to, of course, the employer, and no liability to the employer. But at the same time, the individual is able to do this work and learn and earn wages. The last being resources. So outside of looking at the actual employment that they're interested in, they go through a gambit of resources as far as looking at labor market information. What is the potential of this job in the next 10 years? What is the next 60 days, the next 90 days? What is the outlook of this job that this individual is looking for? And looking at the market information to see if it's even sustainable as a career. Also providing referrals and accessible to job openings. There's tons of people that deal with Texas Workforce. And in our case, where it's called Texas Workforce Solution, I'm sure every state has a title of workforce solution, but a lot of companies go to Texas Workforce and say, hey, if you have individuals that can, meet this XYZ criteria, we want to be an open door for job opportunities. So not only just providing market information, but also direct referrals to accessible job openings. Looking at their interests and skills. Some people are not quite sure, what they want to do. That there's several different assessments on interest and skill levels. Again, always any kind of a technology resources, assistive devices to help, transportation and mobility services. There's a lot of resources where vocational rehab employee, and it's provide ride accessible, like transportation to get individuals to and from the jobs, at no cost. Job fairs is always a resource, to get an individual to look at, again, looking at the human approach and the whole person is getting employed, and what do I need to provide for the employer to ensure that this person can stay up to par, and ultimately become successful and often independent. So I had a little story about the power of inclusion that deals with Rosie and Andres, and I'm not sure if it'll play, but I'll try it and see. But this is kind of the apprenticeship program, and just give me a yes if you can hear the video play. It's about 3 minutes long.
I've got to be honest with you. I can hear it muffled, but I can't hear the full sound.
You can hear it muffled.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I can turn up the volume.
That started before the video.
So the video started, you just couldn't hear it?
Right before the video, you were muffled a little bit.
Okay. But was the video pretty clear as far as sound?
No sound.
No
No,
sound.
no sound. Okay.
I'm wondering if you need to share sound. Like when you
Uh,
share the presentation, there's
Yeah.
like a little checkbox where you can click to share sound.
Okay. Well, I'll share this. Matter of fact, I'll leave this to Adam, and I'll share it with Adam, and you guys can watch that just for the sake of time. Would that be okay?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's about 3 minutes long. So, but what it talks about is that it talks about the overall the inclusion as far as someone having the opportunity to work in a real workplace, to earn real wages, to be part of an employer that's in their community, that values them as a part of their community and a part of the company. Is kind of what the two stories were about. But inclusion drives positive change. The fact of the matter is, Voc Rehab believes that when companies adjust to support people with disabilities, they often create improvements that help everyone. They're definitely like clear training, right? Because someone that may have an intellectual or developmental disability may, of course, learn different than the average person. It provokes companies to be clearer in their training aspects, to communicate better in their aspects, to make sure that these flexible arrangements and schedules, whether they be for training hard to hearing individuals, BVI, traumatic brain injury, TBI customers. It does, however, sometimes promote clear and more transparency in their training aspects, which overall makes an employer a lot more strong because they have a diverse way that they give training, unlike some companies that are only one way or the other. Voc Rehab believes that from accommodation to advantage, right? VR helps employers see ability, not the disability. So the goal is to, educate, train, and provide ongoing support to ensure that an employer understands that this is just not a one-stop shop. We're just not here to present individuals, drop them off, and hope the best for them. I mean, there's a gambit of support that comes with these individuals, and it's not just support. It's really overall empowerment. VR doesn't just place, again, as we mentioned, people in jobs. It equips workplaces to bring out their best. This shared success reshapes how companies define overall talent and value. VR opens doors to untapped talent. There's 6,4,166 individuals, 29% of the population here in Texas, individuals that have a disability. I mean, there's a 3.5 or 4%, or maybe it's a little less than that as far as unemployment rate. Who's tapping into the 6 million people that are actually able to work that may or may not be working? So VR actually has these, starts these conversations and allow these companies to be informed that there are individuals that have many level of criteria that, and oftentimes there's individuals that meet the criteria of this employer, but because this individual has a disability, they may have not been accommodating for themselves and spoken for themselves, as far as they may be afraid to go to the interview, or they may have been afraid to apply online because when it comes to the interview, they may be afraid of what people's going to say because they have a speech impediment when they start to talk. So, that's where VR kind of gets in and open these doors to this particular untapped talent by supporting these individuals, and finding and maintaining meaningful employment, helping companies diversify their workforce, not only in the background and identity, but in perspective, problem solving, lived experience. This leads to ultimately richer collaborations and more innovative teams. On a community and economic impact side, Voc Rehab transformed many, many workplaces in the fact that every individual that's placed to the VR program reduces the dependency on public benefits by an average of $7,000 to $12,000 a year. So after these individuals are successfully placed and trained and employed, now they become a tax-paying citizen, and they're actually paying their part of their tax liability and tax, income, which ultimately reduces the burden and the dependency on the public system. It reduces the need to have as much SSI and SSDI, right? They can take a little less SSI and a little less SSDI now because actually they're making a gainful wage that's actually supplementing them. But also they're also paying taxes now, which helps any community and as far as their economic impact. Over a lifetime, transitioning these workplaces by helping individuals find gainful work through a successful VR placement can ultimately contribute an estimated $300,000 to $500,000 in net economic benefit over the course of a lifetime. And we're dealing with economic earnings plus contributions, and also through savings on the public assistance side. So as we're saving on public assistance, this is of course money that goes back into the economic impact of the communities, which overall is a success down the road. So these are the things that Voc Rehab are having conversations when they're transitioning individuals into workplaces and having conversation with employers in hopes of helping them to do, as we call, transforming workplaces. Successful outcomes. I'm sorry, did anyone have any questions? I'm just kind of blazing here. I'm sorry. No? Okay. So employment
Hey, Art,
outcomes.
I got a question for you.
Yes.
Great presentation so far, but you might even touch on this later, but how does VR work with some of the nonprofits in your area? Do you have partnerships and things like that going on with NGOs or other government organizations?
They typically, one of the bigger ones that VR normally works really closely with in most communities is the Goodwill system, the Goodwill industry system. They also work here in Tyler. They work with the Texas Institute, the Texas Lighthouse for the Blind. Those are some entities that I've known that VR to work closely with, that has a very great relationship in providing some of those entry-level positions for individuals that are trying to enter the workplace and not really going through what I call a typical employer. These are more specialized employees that actually have people that are working in their workforce, and a very large number of them working in their workforce already with different levels of, I say, diverse abilities. So those are two that I know of that VR works really closely with. There's also been other partnerships with there's another like a lot of our resale stores, but on the nonprofit side, I think the United Way is another one that I think VR has worked with in providing resources through volunteer opportunities through the United Way, the Red Cross, or just a few that I can name. Does that answer your question, Matt?
Great. Thanks, Art.
Yeah,
I have
not a problem.
I have a
Thanks, Matt.
question.
I'm sorry,
Do
what was it?
these people with with what's happening in the government right now, do these people fall within that crack of they should be working, but they're not working? You know
There
what
are
I'm
a
thinking about?
yeah, there's a very large percentage of those individuals that are receiving. Again, these are supplemental services, and some of these individuals are able to work. But again, I think it speaks to the strain that often can be put on the system. When services are provided and there's no other resource other than give, there's really no, well, let me do something different to offset the burden. I think it speaks to kind of what we're dealing with right now and the struggle. I mean, it's really unfortunate. Um, but I would say some of those individuals, to answer your question, Linda, some of these individuals may fall in that category. Again, I don't have stats and facts and figures on that, but SNAP is one of those kind of programs, kind of like, it's a government supplemental type system for individuals, to help in their food disparity. Does that kind of answer your question, Linda?
Right. So all the people I've seen with disabilities that are working and employed, they're much happier working and being employed than they are receiving benefits.
Right. In the course of me doing this every day, there's more people that I speak with that want to find gainful employment enough to offset the fact that they really don't even want to have benefits anymore. They want to know, how can I get to the point to where I no longer have to have benefits? I think the max in most benefits are like $937 a month for most individuals. If they meet certain criteria, it can go up from there. But I think just a general disability payment maxes out somewhere around $937 a month. And a good $12, 13-hour job at 30 hours a week, 30 to 32 hours a week can typically offset that pretty quickly. But what I do know is that some individuals that are working and still choosing to keep their benefits, as they earn wages, they're reporting those wages, and a percentage of their disability payments are deducted and recovered by states to offset them earning, more money. So it kind of offsets each other in that way. But most individuals that work, want to get a job. They don't want to have benefits. They really want to be self-sufficient. So Gino said Illinois DOT hires Goodwill Industry, United Cerebral Palsy, especially for we no longer use that word, Gino, to maintain the rest areas along interstates. Very good. In the school. Yeah, so typically that's spot on, Gino. In regards
we were one of the largest employers for that group
Yep.
in the Midwest.
Yeah. I mean, Goodwill is one of the main ones that comes up in almost every conversation. But I have seen some internal things that, I don't think Goodwill works as efficient as I feel like they could be for that population. But that's just my own personal opinion. But they do get a ton of resources as far as funds to help with these programs for this population. But a lot of times I feel like it's kind of checking boxes so we can keep getting the money. I mean, they got a good name and a big name out there, but just my personal experience, that we'll save that for another conversation. But you're right. There are a lot of individuals out there that's doing good. So Voc Rehab, they don't get as much in the weeds as an employment service provider. Again, they're kind of doing the formality and giving the structure, but then of course they send us the contract and they send us the referral, and we're kind of out in the weeds. So a lot of times we see things that they don't always see, and we have some other barriers that we typically try to overcome that are not often spoken of on that upper level. It's kind of stuff that we get down into the trenches that we have to work out. But overall, I think everyone, provides a service, and again, it provides an opportunity for a lot of these individuals that, honestly, they may never have if it wasn't for these programs. So I'm definitely thankful for them being out there. But overall, some of the main things that's as in, speaking on the transitioning, employment outcomes, and success rates Most states, on average, that invest in VR services typically see on an average of $10 return for every dollar spent. So hypothetically, for every work skill based assessment that the Voca Rehab pays for this individual to become gainfully employed, they're basically saying that the states that actually take these individuals and work through the program with Voc Rehab, that on average they see a $10 return for the average dollar spent. And it's overall due to the increased employment, the tax revenue, and decreased reliance on public assistance. So, as mentioned, as the individuals become gainfully employed, and employers embrace employing these people and keeping them long term and allowing the supports to be there for them that's available, then of course this return does have some effect, in those situations as far as success rates. 87% of employers who've hired, individuals through a VR program have reported higher satisfaction with employee performance. One thing we noticed through Voc Rehab is that it changes the culture of some companies when individuals with disabilities are hired. People want to learn more about these individuals. They embrace the differences, and they feel like, okay, this person is really trying to do something for themselves. It almost compels some of these people to want to help. But again, vice versa, you do have the individuals that are out there that don't want no part of it, which such is life, but the employers that do embrace it and their employees embrace it, we do find that it's, on average about 87% reported satisfaction through their overall performance. These people are supported. They feel part of the team. They feel that they're just as equal as everyone that's working around them, and they perform to the degree. The average person that has a disability and gets an opportunity to stay on a job, the average lifespan of their time on a job is 4 years, a minimum of 4 years. So typically, when you talk about retention and long-term employment, an individual that has a disability that gets a job and gets an opportunity that may have not had one otherwise, when they get on the job, they stay on the job. They don't just leave a job. As mentioned, an average of 4 years is the average. But on the business side of things, Voc Rehab deals a lot of with trying to get companies to embrace the inclusion. Companies that embrace disability inclusion report 28% higher revenue, 30% greater profit margins, and oftentimes 2 times the net income compared to other peers. And this source was actually pulled from Accenture when they had a little article dealing with getting to equal, the advantage of just disability inclusion. And those are some staggering numbers for individuals. And I think Tim Hardens is one of the major companies. I know, what was the other sub place? Mike's, is it Mike's Subs? I think it's Mike's, for the sub company. I think they just got on board with an inclusion company, I believe up in with a company called Best Buddies. And they've committed to providing, they have 3,000 stores. They've committed to inclusion by providing one job at each one of their stores, which equates to about 3,000 jobs that they've committed to giving individuals with disabilities an opportunity to work for their company. So again, when you talk about the business case, I mean, there are some advantages outside of the work opportunity tax credit and so many different other things, but companies do have a greater benefit, and a lot of states incentivize companies to support these individuals through a monetary, means. So Voc Rehab is always, a big component of putting that information out there, that there is some benefit financially for companies, that, want to support the initiative of, making inclusivity a normal thing. But the cost of a reasonable accommodation, as mentioned earlier, 59% costs zero. The rest, 41% of the average, is only an average of $500. And this is over years of information that come through the JAN network, which is the Job Accommodation Network, which is I think it's jan.org, that has tons of information about resources as far as accommodations for individuals with disabilities. Workplace diversity and innovation. So workplaces with inclusive hiring practices are 6 times more likely to be innovative. They're 2.6 times more likely to meet or exceed financial targets because they have individuals that are relentless, individuals that love what they do, They don't have a bad day. They come to work. They want to learn. They want to be part of something. They'll put in different efforts and different initiatives that you may not get from the average person that got, all these different issues that they deal with. These individuals are more likely to help companies meet or exceed their financial targets. Again, 87% of the employees who hired through the program reported overall satisfaction. I think there's a few more slides here. That was another story. But at the end of all things, what I like to talk about in the aspect of inclusion and transformation, Voc Rehab is a real big opportunity for every state in their initiative to provide inclusion. Inclusion is typically kind of what the baseline goal for them would be, and it starts with the power of one. And most of the conversations that are had and that are in support of individuals with intellectual and development and disability, is that inclusion is just not a box to check. It's not a checkbox that we do. Oh, we want to do goodwill. Oh, we want to help people. We want to support people with disabilities. I mean, it's more than that. It's more of a door that's being opened. Because if you open a door for one person, that person does well and continues to do well, it may open a door for another person. And overall, behind these doors that are opening these individuals through an inclusion process, behind it are voices. There's people, there's talents, there's dreams, and all of these things are what reshapes our world on a day-to-day basis. It's not the things that are alike that change our world. It's the many differences that are out there that changes our world. If everybody did the same thing, thought the same way, walked the same way, and talked the same way, what kind of world would it be? Right? So we have to have some differences to know that there's other opportunities for all of us. So we always pose the question, and VR is really a big advocate and component of posing the question of, will you be the one who opens that door? And that's the fight, that's the fight that we put up every day, as Voc Rehab representatives and individuals that are out here fighting for inclusion and providing opportunities for people that may not have the opportunity otherwise. In our fight, we're always asking, will you be the one? Because as mentioned, it only starts with number one. It starts with one. So that basically concludes the majority of the program. I know it's a little different than national. It's probably a little more spin we put on it, but hopefully I've shared something and some information from the presentation that has educated it and that has brought some education, but also brought some inspiration to know that, now we are better informed that there are opportunities for, our trike recipients and their families. There are opportunities that, are available for most of them. Because as we mostly know, typically the person that's receiving a trike is probably someone in their family that's not far removed from being a potential person to receive some benefits from Voc Rehab. So I think knowing this information and learning this information and having it readily available, just being informed, I believe information is power, right? The better we're informed, the better we're able to serve people. And that's what we do day in and day out. We're AMBUCs, right? So the more we know, the more we grow. So on the screen, if those of you that have your camera phones, if you take a scan of that QR code, that should typically take you to the state vocational rehab agency that's in your area for more information on how your program works. And again, my name is Arthur Carter. I'm an AMBUC at Longview 2, and I have greatly appreciated the opportunity to bring this information back before you, in hopes that I provided some value for this evening.
Very good.
Well,
Enjoy.
thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
I know that I have employed numerous people of variety of challenges, and I will tell you that they are the most dedicated employees. And so if anybody ever has that thought, it is very beneficial for an employer. Yes, you may have to make changes like Art said, but they can be the most dedicated employees and will, like you said, stay with you for a long time and bring your bring a lot of joy to your office, just knowing that they're so happy to be there and work there and show up every day.
Yeah.
They are.
Because your team member has your staff person has been there what, like 18 years, Carmela?
Yes, yes. And I actually have 2 others there too. So, yeah,
Thank you for that, Carmela. That's perfect. Thank you.
welcome.
Yeah,